Hello everybody and welcome to the next instalment in the NCTJ Summer School series. Today's topic is techniques for an effective interview. Now my name's Emma Robinson and I am the accreditation manager at the NCTJ. Before I joined the NCTJ I worked at NewsQuest Essex where I joined as a trainee reporter, became a senior reporter, then a crime reporter before becoming a news editor. Now in my role as a crime reporter I interviewed everybody from victims of crime, criminals to police officers. So I know that the interview is one of the most important, if not the most important part of the process. You might have a flair for writing or a knack for finding a good story, but without getting all the information that you need, you won't be able to write it. So today's session, we'll be running through preparations to carry out before the interview, my tips and tricks for that, during the interview, how to make it a success, and what to do at the end of an interview as well. So starting with preparations ahead of the interview. Now the key message here is fail to prepare, prepare to fail. The research is crucial. Know what it is that you're writing about. If you're going to be interviewing a counsellor, read through the counsel documents, the committee meeting minutes ahead of time, know the topic inside out or as much as you can beforehand. If you don't know the topic, there's no harm in telling the interviewee, look, I'm not sure what it is this is all about, please help me learn more about it. And there's nothing wrong as well with writing down your questions in advance to make sure you ask the key points that you want to cover. But the key thing is, don't treat it like a script. Feel free to divert away from the questions when the interviewee says something interesting or that you might want to follow up on. I used to put a star in the corner of my notepad of anything that I wanted to come back to later to remind me. Another thing is be precise with your questions. Make sure they can't be understood and don't ask double negatives. You don't want the interviewee being confused or misinterpreting your questions. There's nothing worse than the interviewee getting themselves in a muddle or going down a path that you hadn't intended and you don't want them to be going down. I think there's no harm as well in planning a few soft questions to ease them into the interview. Ask them the spelling of their name, their correct job title, ask them about their day. But I think it's also key to think about who you're interviewing when you're starting like this. If you're interviewing an experienced police officer or a businessman or a politician, they might not have a lot of time on their hands. So their time is precious and you want to get straight to the point, get cracking with the interview. As I said before, know your goals ahead of time and what you want to get out of the interview. Think about where you want the story to go or where the top line might come from or what news desk want from the story. If you're talking about attacks in a park, bring it back to the public. Should the public be concerned? Ask who you're interviewing, the police officer, for example, what should the public do? Connect your story to the readers. If it doesn't work and you can't get the angle that you want as well, don't force it. Go what the interviewee is saying and you might find that you get a better interview and better quotes that way. Think about where the interview is happening as well. Are you meeting them face to face? Find a good location and avoid background noise. It's always a good idea as well to interview them in a place that's relevant to the story, so you can take pictures and film them and point to things, or if the location is relevant, that's always good too. And make sure there's nothing in the background as well to distract the eye, cars going past, background noise is always not something that you want. Now think about when you're setting up the interview. Who it is depends on how you get the interview. If it's something personal, it can be done on the phone or in person. But if you're getting a corporate response to an accusation of company malpractice, for example, or you need a formal quote from the police, then it's better off going to the press office, through the press office, and making sure that you give them enough time as well to get that statement to you. Think about your deadlines and think about how much time they need. So the next section is during the interview. What should you do during the interview? And these are my tips for best practice. Now, the first thing is work on your flow. This is challenging, but also a very important interview skill. You need to strike a balance between being conversational and getting the job done. So when the interview is answering your questions, make sure you're getting them down, but also think about the next question you will ask. And the flow of questions needs to seem natural and conversational. So as I said earlier, don't feel like you need to treat your set questions like a script. If something comes up that they're talking about, make sure that you're following up on what they're saying. This will keep the interviewee at ease and ensure they open up as well. I think another interesting point is to avoid obsessive note-taking as well. I mean, good notes are important, but you may do yourself a disservice by obsessing over every little detail and every single word. I think, it's a good skill to have to discern the gems from the chatter, so focus on the quotes that you do want and the information that you do want to use. I think there's nothing wrong as well with being a little annoying. Don't be afraid to relentlessly revisit a question or a topic if you don't feel like you've got the answer that you wanted or it hasn't been phrased properly. Sometimes people respond better if the question is worded differently as well. So if they go off track or into a long ramble, don't be afraid to pull them back to the topic. Another thing that sometimes happens is if they refuse point blank to answer your question, make it clear that you're going to put your questions to them regardless, or that you'll make it clear that they refuse to answer. It's better to show that you've challenged them and asked the right questions and explain why they refuse to answer in your story, than not knowing or not explaining that. So in those cases, I think don't let your exasperation get the better of you. Be firm and polite at all times. So I think another point to make is that to get a complete answer and think about the colour that you want to include in your story. If you're asking a question that only answers with yes or no, that doesn't give you much colour. Ask open-ended questions and emotive questions. So like, what do you think about this? How has that made you feel? Why do you care so much about this issue? That's always good to generate some colour and emotion. So if you don't understand the answer that they're giving you, don't be afraid to go back and check or repeat to them what you think is right. There's nothing worse than getting your notes together, trying to write up the story and not knowing the process or not knowing how it started to the end. If you don't answer, there's nothing wrong with repeating it or checking. I think the interviewee will understand that. And also, I think it's a good idea to tell the person who you're interviewing what you're planning on doing with the story and the line that you want, particularly if it's someone that you know well. For example, ask what you need. Look, I'm looking for someone to give some quotes in this way. Are you happy to talk about this like that? Or I really want to get a quote about your feelings about the situation. Can you help in that way? So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. As well, if you're interviewing someone about a certain topic, remember to confirm statements from another source and check and ask questions that you already know the answer to check that everything is right. Keep ethics at the forefront of your mind as well. A good tip that I always stuck by was to enjoy the awkward silences during the interview. I know the instinct is to keep chattering away and to keep people feeling comfortable, but if there is an awkward silence, let it hang sometimes, particularly when people talk about sensitive subjects, and that can help them talk about what they want to say and open up. And also, it goes without saying, always explain that you're a journalist when you're interviewing them, and that it will be written up on the paper, the website, or broadcast somewhere so that everybody knows the situation, and make sure that you set the record straight. When you're interviewing in person as well, I think it's a good idea to think about the best time to get your notepad and pen or your recorder out. If it's a sensitive situation, then give them a couple of minutes to ask some friendly questions, make them feel comfortable, and ask them if you mind to take some notes. But always remember to maintain eye contact as well when making notes. There's nothing, it doesn't work if you're just sat focusing on your notepad. You need to keep that relationship and keep that interview process going with eye contact. So if we move on now to the end of the interview, it's at the end, and it's always at the end when the interviewee starts to let their guard down and might say something unexpected. So keep your brain engaged, keep that notepad and pen ready, or keep your recorder going. There's nothing worse than not having it ready and they say this gem that you want to use in the story. Just look back over your notes and remember to get those last bits of information. Check titles, check spellings, ages, road names, etc. I think a really good tip as well is to always ask a phone number or a way of getting in contact at the end to make sure that you can go back and ring them and check, in case you need to check anything. you always want to be able to go back to these people afterwards as well, just in case. And I think a key thing is thank people for their time. Be polite, be kind. They've obviously given up their time for you, and sometimes it can be quite daunting talking to a journalist. So please thank people for their time. So we've talked about what to do before an interview, how to make a success of an interview, and how to operate at the end of an interview. So I hope all this helps. For more details about becoming a journalist and journalism qualifications, please visit www.nctj.com. Thank you.